It is our City Matters, a very warm welcome once again. For the past 8 weeks, we've been dealing with fees must fall. It's not the first time this year that we've heard about this demand. It started all into the end of last year, where students had called on the government to stop a fee increment. This time around, the call has evolved and they want free education. They want it now. We interrogate the students that are making these calls and why they believe it is affordable for the state to pursue this particular objective. This is our City Matters, a very warm welcome to you. Why are students continuing to protest? The fees must fall movement remain resolute in their demand for free education. The government recently, through the Minister of Finance, allocated more money to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, but they contend that that's not free education, that their demand has been coming for some time now and they believe that time is now. They want the government to act. Are they being a bit impatient? Are they unreasonable? Are they sometimes taking things too far? We put the fees must fall movement in the hot seat. Of course, my guests do not represent all of the fees must fall movement, but they're certainly the voices thereof. In studio, I have Velani Ludidi. He's a journalism student. Also, Songeze, Phahlindlela. He is a fees must fall activist. So too is Lukhanyo, Mtuta. They're all in studio with us this evening. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Cape Town TV. Perhaps if we could start off with you, Lukhanyo, what is the fees must fall movement? Is it something that has been coming for some time? What exactly, how would you describe it?
Well, the fees must fall movement, it's basically a movement of students who are, not everyone is as privileged as the other. And we come from different backgrounds in life and some things we cannot afford. And basically, I feel like education shouldn't be a privilege because at the end of the day, we need to get educated. We need to better the lives of our families. Now, if there are fees that are stipulated for us or to lead us to failure, because at the end of the day, if you're going to charge students who cannot afford this and lead families into debt and stuff, where are we going to end up? Because it feels like these universities, these institutions are setting us up for dropping out. Because at the end of the day, some students get kicked out of these sponsorship, this funding, NSFAS specifically, and people don't qualify for that. So
why do they get kicked out? Is it because of underperformance?
No, it's not that, not at all. Because other students are doing well. I wouldn't think it's underperformance because, for example, there are first-year students who don't make the cut. Now think about a first-year student. It cannot be underperformance considering the fact that this student already qualified to be in this institution. So it's not a fact of being underqualified, but it's just some internal issues with NSFAS because other students, there's not much declaration on why they haven't received funding to pay for their education.
Songeze, who's leading this protest? Is there a leader? Is there a cause other than fees must fall, which is, of course, the broader issue here? Who's leading this movement?
Well, thanks for your question. Fees must fall movement is not led by anyone, but by student general.
Well, you're sitting in very bright red colors there. This is an EFF protest.
No, it's not. It's a collective protest. It's not an EFF protest. It's not an ANC or SASCO protest. No PASMA protest. But it's a protest for all students who are being disadvantaged by the current government or by the institutions of higher learning here in South Africa. No one is leading fees must fall. No one is influencing fees must fall.
There is no decisions. How do decisions get taken? We are told to believe that there must be a leader. There must be somebody leading the revolution other than the thoughts and ideas. Who gets to decide what to do? If you reach an impasse, you need to take a left or a right turn. Somebody needs to take that decision.
The students themselves, they give direction to do themselves. No one gives direction, no one tells students what to do. It's the student themselves who said, no, we can no longer take it now. We can no longer pay fees, so let's take it to the government. Then the government decided not to respond, then the student escalated the matters to the street.
Well, let's talk about escalation of matters. Velani, thank you so much for joining us here on Our City Matters. Velani is, of course, a journalism student. What have you been witnessing through the past 8 weeks? How would you describe the Fees Must Fall movement? Is it a bunch of radicals, or are these just frustrated young people that now wants free education?
I think now it's actually individuals, students who are saying now this is time for free education to come. They are the ones who are saying we're drawing inspiration from the youth of 1976 that free education must come now. And there's been talks about free education. Remember, Fees Must Fall didn't start this year, and Fees Must Fall started in 2015, started in VETS, where then it went to all these universities and stuff. So what I've seen is students actually fighting for a noble cause. Because I do believe, in my personal view, that there is money in South Africa to fund free education.
And I want to get into that, but let's talk about what you've been witnessing. What motivates students to take to the streets to want to shut down the university? I've heard about stories of students sleeping in toilets, sleeping in hallways, not being able to go home, not being able to eat. Is this the lived realities of some of the students that are protesting?
I've actually written like quite a few articles this year about those stuff. Recently, I wrote about the NSFAS because you see, NSFAS gives students their funding. Then there's a left money for vouchers, for food vouchers. That money is allocated for food. Now you fund a student. Let's say the cost is 50,000. Then you give them 53,000, and they're saying 3,000 left is for the student to actually feed him or herself the whole year. So how is that suitable? Like, how can you feed yourself in 3,000 for the whole year? So I've seen students who actually, there's two run noodles, like they eat noodles only. Students who say, we've got accommodation here, so we want to study, but there's nothing else. We came here, no money, and I've seen students actually like sleeping on toilets in CPUT. Others squatting. We know squatting is illegal, it's not allowed, but I've witnessed those students actually. There's this huge gap in South Africa that needs to be filled. And I think what I've witnessed so far is like, I know students have been called names and stuff, but we have not actually looked at this whole picture at all. Like, what is really happening here? Has the government come into the table and say, okay, students, we are saying, yes, the 9 billion was announced, okay, we are increasing the funding to 9 billion, but is this what the students are wanting? And there have been talks about students being hooligans and vandalism and stuff. Yes, I don't think even these guys here are saying we do support vandalism, but I don't know if you did see the assemble. Like, these guys go to a meeting with the council and say, okay, we will decide on this. These are the demands for the students. Then the council says, okay, we're taking them, we will come back to you. And they said Monday, actually, I think 2 weeks back. And what they do, they announce that, hey guys, we have got a new VC. What about the demands? So what message are you sending to the student? You're saying, okay, we did have this, but we don't care about the demands. This is what we're doing. Like, they are pushing the student, agitating them to do this stuff that is happening with burning the buildings and stuff.
So is that agitation leading to students burning down buildings, running amok as it has been described on our streets that we've been seeing, the shutting down of campuses? To what extent do these levels of frustration get through to the politicians, to the vice-chancellors? We'll get into all of that. Why are they burning buildings? All of that just after the break. Do stay with us. It is Our City Matters. Welcome back. We're talking about the Fees Must Fall movement. The country's been gripped by this call for free education for the past 8 weeks. Of course, it all started in the lead up to December last year. Why then still are students on the ground? Can the government afford it? And moreover, why do we see the type of violence associated with the Fees Must Fall movement? Songeze, the violence that we've been seeing, you guys are from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, CPUT. A building was, for instance, set alight. Surely the building has nothing to do with Fees Must Fall.
Yeah, you are correct. The burning of buildings, that one, I think, in fact, it's not a thought. Members of the SAPS plus the private securities that are hired by the institution themselves, they are the ones who must account for those buildings that were burned down. securities, private securities, plus the SAPS members must also account for those cars that were banned in Belleville campus, Cape Town campus, as well as Wellington campus. You will see that the institution itself, plus the government, is trying by all means to destabilize the movement, to cause to try to kill the movement by all means necessary. They even accuse students of burning down the buildings. Take, for example, last week we were in Parliament. Each and every student here in Western Cape was in Parliament. Then suddenly we were told that Wellington campus is on fire, of which we were not there. There are private securities that were hired by institutions that were there. There are SAPS members that were deployed by ministers that were there. So they are the ones who must account for the burning of buildings, not us.
So there's absolutely no campaign to set the institution alight?
No, we don't support any violence. We are not hooligans. We are students who have only simple demand, of which is free Afrocentric education now.
And what happened in front of Parliament when, of course, there was a gathering in front of Parliament ahead of the budget speech? Of course, I myself was there. Then 99% of the students were largely peaceful. They had dispersed. But we did see, and there is a characterization in the movement, that things do get a bit heated, get hot under the collar. What happened, for instance, when we have running battles with the police?
You see, when the government fails to respond to our demand, they send the SAPS members to be their defenders, because we don't have business with SAPS. We only want to communicate with our government that promised us free education. Then they failed to meet our demand, or at least to intervene and come and listen to us of what are we demanding. Then what do they put on the table? All they did was to send police to victimize students. There in Parliament, what you saw in Parliament, as we were saying, we're 99, in fact, we're not 99.9 peaceful. We're 100% peaceful, but it's the police
who was engaged? Who was the police chasing?
Pardon?
Who was the police chasing and firing rubber bullets and windows being smashed,
It's the
etc.?
students. It's the students that they were chasing. The reason for that, it's only them that they can answer. If you watch those videos on YouTube, you can see that no student agitated SAPS members to shoot at us. You'll realize that if you noticed, I even registered that our government have sent snipers to go there and check for whatever reason that they can use to shoot at us. If you look around those buildings, there were snipers there, but none of media, no one noticed that. There's no media house that published that.
Well, that's indeed a very worrisome allegation that you are proposing and stating there, whether the government has deployed snipers on its own people. Well, we can't discount the fact they killed their own people in Marikana, but that's, of course, another matter to discuss. Lukhanyo, how are we going to be funding free education? But before we get to the funding part, why free education for all? Why should the son of an investor, the son of some high-up middle-class person, be given free education when they clearly can't afford it?
Now, that's a good question. Well, it was proposed in certain institutions that people who afford these fees need to pay for themselves. Now, the tricky thing about that scenario is that you find where there's a student, let's say there's like an annual income of 400,000. Maybe some institution will consider that as enough, but mostly in black families, the thing is, in black families, people have extended relatives. So now, that 400,000 doesn't necessarily mean, oh, with this rich family and this and that. No. It means that he must be fed, he needs to go to varsity, they must pay his fees. There's an extended family member. There are monies that are being sent to Eastern Cape. Now,
but
the situation...
The tricky part with that is, one can understand the circumstances of each case, because each case has its own merits.
Yeah.
But the tricky part of that is that there may well be the son of an investor at that university that can afford it. Why are you still then persisting with free education for all?
But the thing is, if you look closely, like the countries who have implemented free education for all, they weren't selective on who doesn't receive this free education.
But
at
are
the end
we
of the
in
day,
a
as a
financial
student,
position like those countries? Can we afford it?
we can. I definitely believe we can. I mean,
Can you
the
tell me
government.
how?
I mean, the government. There's a lot of money that goes to waste in the government. It wouldn't be waste to them because they are the beneficiaries of this money. But if, like, in everything, if people could sit down and have a look at like the fund. They could. It's possible to fund this because I mean, I read an article about 3 weeks back, and it was reported that 101 or 103 million that SABC lost. Now, for me, it's strange. That money, like, where did it go? Like who's spending this money? Like, there are so much. There's like a lot of funds that are being unnecessarily used. Presidents are building 260 million houses worth of houses, and they're paying for pools and all that stuff, and they are using private jets and all that stuff. Now, considering that these people, at the end of the day, are human beings just as much as us. These people could use an I-20 to get from A to B, but they're using Mercedes-Benzes that are worth 900,000, a million plus. Like, if we would cut the cost on those things, because to me, like, they're quite unnecessary. Because at the end of the day, standard is the okay thing, right? So if they would use standard services and allocate the money that is left out of those, like, there's so much that can happen. So what I think is the government can afford this. I believe that South Africa can really afford this to happen because other countries have implemented the free education. So, like, there's no excuse, really. Because I think in China, there is free education, right? Now, the relationship between China and South Africa, I believe it's a good relationship because they are part of that BRICS movement. So now, I feel like the ideas should be the same. If this country implements this, this country should be able or should be helped by these countries to implement this. So, like,
to afford it.
Yeah, to afford it. So there's no real excuse for them not to.
Well,
But
the
just
only
playing on
technicality
us.
that government could argue is that China's economy outranks us by probably 3 to 4 times. But it is something that you most certainly made a very valid argument that there's lots of wastage within the state, and perhaps we can, with a nip and tuck here and there, we can afford free education. We'll get into what to do post this matter. The government has made no commitment to the state. Will universities remain shut down? This is Our City Matters. Stay with us. We're talking about the fees must fall movement. 8 weeks in, universities still uncertain about their future. Students are calling for fees to fall. They remain resolute in their demand. And at which point will we see political leadership being taken by the state? Of course, the president has a lot to do with trying to save his own career, and that seemingly is where the country is at the moment. But at which point do we get serious about a legitimate demand being made by students? This is what we're discussing, of course, the type of violence associated with it. We're also talking about and the nature and the character of the protests that we've been seeing. Velani, when do you suspect, and if any indication of universities resuming? Are universities still shut down? I know UCT, for instance, and Wits University in Johannesburg has been pushing through private security to continue with the academic program. CPUT has suspended most of the academic program. Exams are meant to get underway. What is the status of the shutdown of the campus?
As you said, contact classes are actually suspended almost all universities in South Africa at the moment. In CPUT, classes have been suspended, but exams actually have, the management have issued timetables saying that students will be writing next week, which is something that's also has frustrated the student leaders and the students, saying, how can we write whereas we haven't discussed our institutional issues? So yes, campuses are suspended. Exams, as per CPUT, have confirmed to me that they are going ahead.
In terms of the different views about whether they should remain suspended, some would argue, even the premier of this province argues, that we have a handful of militant young men keeping to ransom an entire university when most students would prefer to go back to class.
I don't know this word most, where it comes from, because if we were to talk about numbers, I so wish we could talk about real numbers. Which, like, is it 50% of or 70% of students want to go back? Or because you look at the protest, what do you see there? It's numbers, it's students. So yes, there is a group that say we want to go back and study. But there's this bigger group we're saying we want what you want. And I think it's a bit divided there, because, but And also look at who does want to go back to school. Is it the students who can afford? Is the students who cannot afford? So there are also dynamics in this stuff. We can't just say most students want to go back. And you did see in West University whereby there were students saying, save our universities. And you could see that's just a small number.
Yeah, something like less than 10 students were
So now,
calling for the university to reopen. But I want to, Songeze, touch on the grave concern, though, despite the legitimacy of your concern, the losing of the academic program is going to create multiple headaches next year when there's a new intake of students that's coming from high school. Can you see, do you foresee that we're going to be losing the academic program in its entirety?
Well, it's not guaranteed that next year the academic, in fact, university activities as a whole, or at large, is going to resume. As soon as the government is not willing to listen to us and meet our demand, we are going to continue shutting down all the universities in South Africa. So we cannot say that next year there will be problem with intakes or what. We're not even going to go there. There is no intake that is going to happen. Our sisters and brothers who are currently in high schools, who are writing matric, by the time they set their foot in the doorsteps of the universities, free Afrocentric education must be implemented. So I'm not sure where your question lies with, because it's not guaranteed that next year we are going to continue with our academic activities.
What does that mean? Children are not going to graduate, things are going to remain dormant. The government says it can't commit to free education just yet. Is there uncertainty about whether they will ever open?
Yeah, as long as our demand is not met, universities will remain shut down.
All right.
We're not going to compromise on that one. We're only demanding a simple demand that they promised us prior to 1994. If you check at the ANC manifesto for the 1994 elections, free education was there. If you check their elections manifesto of national elections in 2009, free education was there. What is difficult now on implementing what you have promised to us?
Lukhanyo, just very quickly, we're going to have to round up shortly. I want to talk about this call also for decolonized education. It's not just free education. We want education that benefits us as Africans. What does that mean?
Well, like we've been taught, for me, like as a student, like from my perspective, from my understanding, is that I cannot, well, for example, I'm doing journalism, right? Now, I'll relate your question to what I'm familiar with. Now, the thing is, if we are taught like decolonized education, like why aren't we, if our education was so, if our education was colonized, then there would be students who know about the previous leaders of the struggle of South Africa. But like, it starts from a very small level, because considering the fact that we are taught Jan van Riebeeck, French Revolution, like what does that have to do with us really? Like why aren't we taught about Robert Sobukwe? Like why aren't we taught about why is there a school called Joe Slovo? Like these are the things that really touch us. These are the things that really have to do with us. So if we are taught colonized education, we're going to be taught about the Boston Tea Party. We're not in Boston, like we're really not. We're not in France. Those are the things, like to me, it's quite unnecessary. So if we need to be taught about our issues, our own state issues, our previous issues, our history, the legacy that we live, the youth, the future, about how things will happen, or things that are relating to us, definitely. So I just don't think it's getting colonized, decolonized, yeah, the word slipped in my mind. Now,
so, okay, we're going to have to round up. Will we see, moving forward, universities still remaining shut down up until such time that government commits to free education? Will we still continue hearing Solomone or Asina Male? Will that continue ringing loud at universities?
Until the government commits to our plea, then we'll remain resolute in our movement.
Yeah.
So that's what we're saying. We'll remain resolute in our movement that we want free, decolonized education. Until then we can go back to classes and resume with our studies. But if that is not achieved, then we'll remain within our movement, and we'll do what we
which you have to do.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the ball then is in government's court. This can all be stopped if it is that they commit to free education and they find ways, seriously so, to realize free education. The call is there, the policy directives need to come from the state, and these young men feel that it is possible. Let's find out how possible it can be. That's it for our City Matters. From myself, Tashrik Trubari, and the entire team, you have a good night. Thank you so much for tuning in.